Discovery Channel. Our topic today is about the first Transcontinental Railroad.
The first Transcontinental Railroad was 1,912-mile continuous rail line constructed between 1863 and 1869 that connected the existing eastern U.S. railroad network at Oklahoma, Nebraska, Council Bluffs, Iowa, with the Pacific Coast and Oakland Long Wharf on the San Francisco Bay.
The rail line was built by 3 private companies over public lands provided by extensive U.S. grants. Construction was financed by both state and U.S. government subsidy bonds, as well as company-issued mortgage bonds.
The Transcontinental Railroad was founded by 2 main companies, Central Pacific and Union Pacific Railroad.
The Western Pacific Railroad Company built 132 miles of track from Oakland through Alameda to Sacramento, California. The Central Pacific Railroad Company of California, CPRO, constructed 690 miles eastward from Sacramento to Promontory Summit, Utah Territory. The Union Pacific built 1,085 miles from the road's eastward terminus at Council Bluffs near Omaha, Nebraska, westward to Promontory Summit.
The railroad opened for throughout traffic on May 10, 1869, when CPRR President Leland Stanford ceremonially drove the gold last spike with a silver hammer at Promontory Summit. The coast-to-coast railroad connection revolutionized the settlement and economy of the American West. It brought the western states and territories into alignment with the northern Union states and made transporting passengers and goods coast to coast considerably quicker and less expensive.
The enabling legislation for the Union Pacific required that no partner was to own more than 10% of the company's stock. However, the major investor was Thomas Clark Durant, President Lincoln's former employer, who made his money smuggling Confederate cotton during the war. Durant used proxies to control about half the stock of the railroad. Carlos Huntington was inspired by Theodore Judah Lexel on the possibilities of a railroad. Huntington found 4 partners who initially invested $1,500 each. The partners include Leland Stanford, a grocer, the future governor of California, and founder of what became Stanford University. These investors became known as the Big Four, and the venture was called the Central Pacific Railroad.
The early talk of a transcontinental railroad stated in 1830, shortly after railroads began large-scale operations in the United States. At about the same time, English-speaking settlers began settling in Mexican-controlled California.
Much of the early debate was not so much over whenever it would be built, but what route it should follow. A central route via the Platte River in Nebraska and the South Pass in Wyoming, or a southern route, avoiding the Rockies by going through Texas to Los Angeles. An urban option generally following the route explored by Lewis and Clark through Montana and Oregon was considered impractical because of snow.
In June 1845, Asa Whitney led a team along the proposed central route to access its capabilities. Whitney then traveled widely to solicit support for the rail line, printed maps and pamphlets, and submitted several proposals to Congress. Legislations to begin constructing of Pacific Railroad via the Central Route was introduced in Congress but not yet acted on.
The Samoa and the Gadsden Purchase, California became a U.S. territory in 1848 with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which ended the Mexican-American War. The very same year, saw the beginnings of the California Gold Rush, which brought great numbers of people west, many of whom stayed. California became increasingly an important part of the United States, and the idea of a rail connection to it gained support.
When we return, we will show you the challenges that the builders of the Transcontinental Railroad had to face.
Beep beep, coming through. Beep beep, gotta get to the airport. Are you tired of waiting in bumper-to-bumper traffic? How about the high prices of gas? How about long lines at the airport? TSA agents that make you take off your shoes and belt just to get on a plane. Paying extra just to bring your suitcase. Ride Amtrak. No delay, all day. Get your ticket now.
Back. We will now look at the challenges the builders of the Transcontinental Railroad had to face.
Concerns lingered that the snow would make it the central route impractical. A survey indicated that the best southern path ran through the territory still held by Mexico. Therefore, in 1853, only 5 years after taking California by force, the United States made the garrison purchase from Mexico, acquiring the southern portions of what is now New Mexico and Arizona. This placed the Southerners' Transcontinental Railroad entirely within the U.S. However, despite approving this purchase, Congress did not approve this construction at that time.
Native American tribes increasingly came into conflict with the railroad as they attempted to defend their diminishing resources. Additionally, the railroad brought with white homesteaders who farmed the newly tamed land that had been the bison domain. Tribes of the plains that found themselves at cultural odds with the white building the railroad, and settlers claimed ownership over land that had previously never been owned. In response, Native Americans sabotaged the railroad and attacked white settlers supported by that line in an attempt to reclaim the way of life that was being taken from them.
Early 1861, Theodore Judah, a rail construction engineer, and Daniel Strong, a local miner, surveyed what became the western portion of the route. They proposed a rail line in Sierra Nevada mountains through Clipper Gap, Emigrants Gap, and Donner Pass, then south to Truckee.
Track laying employees a quarter of the labor force. The operation also required a great number of blacksmiths, carpenters, engineers, masons, surveyors, tracksters, and cooks. Telegraph lines were built following the track, bringing near instant communication.
On January 8, 1863, Leland Stanford, now governor, officially broke ground in Sacramento to begin construction.
The Rocky Mines required tunneling, a slow, expensive, and dangerous process. Holes about 3/4 of an inch diameter were pounded 5 feet into the rock face by hammer, chisel. A single hole was a day's work for 2 men. With the end of the Civil War came increased governor's supervision. The Union Pacific began laying tracks west. Construction was handled another company controlled by the Credit Moliber westward. Construction proceeded very quickly over the open terrain of the Great Plains.
Many cars were designed specifically to build and maintain railroad facilities. For example, dump cars, snowplows or burners, and dust sprinklers were used to maintain roadbeds and tracks. Hand cars allowed inspectors and supervisors to cover a fair distance to check track work. Clearance cars made sure there was enough space between tracks and gliders or tunnel walls. Pulling cars were used to distribute cars in a switchyard. Dynograph cars measured, among other things, train speed and distance, and checked the condition of the rails and roadbed. Crane cars cleared wreckage, pile driver cars placed piers for bridges, and steam shovel cars evacuated road.
The type of engine that was used in this time period was the steam locomotive. A steam locomotive is a type of railway locomotive that produces its pulling power through a steam engine. These locomotives are fueled by burning combustible material, usually coal, wood, or oil, to produce steam in the boiler. The pointed leads of iron bars at the front of early train engines were called a cowcatcher. It served the same purpose for bison, lifting, pushing their elegant beasts to the side, preventing derailment of the train, but usually killing the animal. As tourists became steaming less, some amused themselves during a long journey by shooting bison from the windows of their rail cars.
Theodore Dyer, a railroad engineer, and Daniel Strong, a local miner, surveyed what became the western portion of the route. They proposed a rail line in the Sierra Nevada mountains through the Clipper Gap and Merge Gap and the Donner Pass, then the South Churchill.
Grenville Dodge was the chief engineer of the driving force behind the Union Pacific Railroad. Dodge had a military background, having achieved the rank of general in the Union Army during the Civil War. In 1865, he led the U.S. Army's campaigns against the Plains Indians.
Charles Crocker was an American railroad executive. He founded the Central Pacific Railroad. His company constructed the part of the Transcontinental Railroad that was the most west.
Next, will they be able to finish the railroad? Will it be successful, or will it be a huge waste of money and time? Stay tuned.
What? Stupid piece of crap! No way! Is this the Flexibag? Introducing Flexibag. Hold your towels, phones, socks, and even your wallet. Buy one today. It's even durable.
We will now see what happens when the railroad is complete.
6 years after work began, laborers of the Central Pacific Railroad from the west and the Union Pacific Railroad from the east met in Promontory Summit, Utah. It was here on May 10, 1869, that Governor Stanford drove the Golden Spike, or the last spike, that symbolized the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad. Few were aware that the spike was merely gold-plated, gold being much too soft for the purpose and probably not billable.
On June 4th, 1876, a train named the Transcontinental Express arrived in San Francisco, 83 hours and 39 minutes, after it left New York City. There was a great celebration around the country, travel time from the coast to coast. It had been reduced from 6 months to 1 week.
The Union Pacific Railroad was in bankruptcy. Less than 3 years after the completion of the line, as details surfaced about overcharges by Credit Mullabler for the building of the railroad. The scandal was one of the biggest of the 19th century.
In many areas where the original line has been bypassed and abandoned, primarily in Utah, the former route is still obvious. Amtrak runs the California Zephyr Rail service using the original Transcontinental Railroad route from Sacramento to Winnemucca, Nevada. The Zephyr often uses the original route on the westbound runs from Winnemucca to Wells, Nevada. The eastbound runs between these towns usually use more recent tracks.
Today, the rail line moves through a far different countryside. Wheat fields fill the plains instead of bison. Commerce increased between the states, allowing over $50 million worth of cargo to be shipped every year from 1869 to 1879. Goods from Asia and raw materials from the west were shipped to the east faster than ever before. The west began to catch up with the eastern way of life as many more people could now move west, and the products and manufactured boom were shipped to the west.
In conclusion, we've learned a lot about the trails of rails.
We learned all the people who were involved, the complications, and the great successes.
We hope you learned something today.
We'll see you next time here on the Discovery Channel.